Ready for some seriously epic tales? We're diving into the book of Joshua today, chapters 10 through 12. Military campaigns, divine intervention, stories that, well, people are still talking about them thousands of years later.
It's fascinating stuff, no doubt. And these chapters, well, they're more than just battles, They give us a glimpse into how the Israelites viewed things, warfare, leadership, even their covenant with God.
Exactly, this incredible blend of history, faith, strategy, even the supernatural. We're in the heart of the Old Testament, right? After wandering in the desert for like decades, the Israelites, now led by Joshua, are finally entering the Promised Land.
And let me tell you, things are about to get intense.
Intense is an understatement. Chapters 10 through 12, it's a whirlwind of conquest. Joshua leading the Israelites to victory after victory.
We're not just talking like border skirmishes here.
Oh no, not at all. We're talking about those moments where the line between what humans do and, well, let's just say extraordinary events. That line gets incredibly blurry. The Battle of Gibeon, for example.
Yeah, Gibeon, a classic David and Goliath kind of situation. But with this fascinating twist, right? Alliances and geography really come into play.
Totally. Okay, so we've got these 5 Amorite kings, and they've heard about Joshua, about his victories, and they're starting to sweat a little.
I'd be sweating too in their shoes.
Right. They realize, okay, we need to team up if we're going to stand a chance against the Israelites.
Shows you how important strategic partnerships were, even back then. These kings, they knew their best shot at survival. It was joining forces against this new threat.
And their target, the Gibeonites, who had made a peace treaty with Israel. But Gibeon, it wasn't just any city. It was strategically vital, a gateway kind of city in the Central Highlands.
Control Gibeon, control the surrounding territory. Smart move on the part of the Amorites. Except they underestimated one thing, a big thing.
The Israelites' faith in their God.
You got it.
And the Gibeonites, they realize they're in trouble, serious trouble. So they call on Joshua for help. And Joshua, he doesn't even hesitate. Talk about courage.
Imagine that. Facing an army, 5 kings, and you choose to march through the night to help your allies. Speaks volumes about their trust, their faith in divine protection.
It's a risk, a huge risk. But like you said, this unwavering faith. Do not fear them, God had told Joshua, for I have handed them over to you.
It's that belief, that deep conviction. It fueled their strategy, their daring. They weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting for a promise, for a future, ordained by God.
And then comes the moment that gives me chills every time I read it. The sun stands still. Can you imagine?
It's one of those events, it transcends time and place. The idea that the sun, it just stopped in the sky at the plea of a man, awe-inspiring.
Talk about an advantage in battle. The text tells us Joshua, filled with, I don't even know, adrenaline and pure faith, he cries out, "Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon."
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you were there, right there on that battlefield, how would you even process something like that? How would it change the way you saw the world, the divine?
It's easy to get stuck on the how and the why. But the real question is, what does this event tell us about, the connection between divine power, God's power, and what humans do? Was it a miracle? A sign of God's favor?
Or was it something else entirely? Something that, challenged how the ancient Israelites saw the natural order of things. That's where it gets really interesting, don't you think?
Absolutely. Countless debates, interpretations throughout history. And for good reason. There's like this cosmic pause. It emboldens the Israelites. What comes next is just victory after victory across southern Canaan.
A
Remarkable.
cascade of conquests, yeah. But there's a method to it. Joshua's not just picking cities at random. He's targeting specific places, strategically dismantling the resistance in the region.
So not just divine intervention then. It's about combining that faith with real strategy.
Exactly. Think about Makeda, Libnah, Lachish, all important cities, each with strategic value. Joshua takes them down one by one. Real leadership there.
He doesn't just win either. The text keeps saying it left no survivors.
Mm.
It's a pretty stark picture of warfare back then.
It is. It can be, jarring to read those words today, but the ancient world, it was a different time, different rules, a different understanding of warfare.
Absolutely. We see those differences in these accounts for sure. But even with all these big victories, there are these little details that bring the stories to life,
Oh, for sure. Like that story about those 5 Amorite kings. After Gibeon, they hide in a cave hoping to escape Joshua.
Imagine that. The fear, hiding in a cave, hoping not to be found.
It really shows the psychological impact of defeat. right? But they're discovered, of course, brought to Joshua, and this is interesting, his commanders put their feet on the necks of these kings.
Wow. Powerful image, literally and symbolically. It's more than a military win. It's complete control over the enemy.
And a reminder that victory back then, it often came with a brutal cost. Those kings were executed, their bodies left hanging. A warning.
A warning that history, even when it's mixed up with faith, with divine intervention, it's not always pretty. And speaking of challenges, the story moves north. Joshua faces what seems like an impossible obstacle.
The northern campaigns, this is a whole new level. We're not talking about 5 kings anymore. We're talking about King Jabin of Hazor leading a massive coalition, an army like the sand on the seashore, it says.
Wow. It's almost impossible to imagine that many soldiers. It would be like facing the ocean itself.
Yeah.
An endless enemy.
Exactly. This is a huge test for Joshua, for the Israelites. But even facing those odds, they still had their faith. They still trusted God's promise.
God does promise Joshua victory. Again, the big battle happens at the waters of Merom. But this time, well, it's a mix of divine help and some serious strategy.
It's not just God acting alone here. The Israelites, they fight with real skill. They hamstring the enemy's horses. Can you imagine the chaos? And then they burn the chariots.
It's like a masterclass in ancient warfare.
Mhm.
They take their faith and combine it with these smart tactics.
Yeah.
Completely outmaneuver the enemy.
They believed God would give them victory, but they still had to play their part right, use their skills, their intelligence.
You know me, I love the details. There's this thing about Hazor, the enemy's main city. It's the only one Joshua burns to the ground. Why single out Hazor for that kind of destruction?
Great question. And one that's puzzled scholars for a long time, to be honest. There are a few ideas about it, though.
All right, let's hear them. I'm all ears.
Well, some think it was strategic. Hazor was the biggest, most important city around. Destroying it completely sends a message. Don't even think about messing with us, basically.
Yeah, I can see that. You're a leader in another city. You see that, you think twice.
Right. Talk about a deterrent. But there's another way to see it, too. Some scholars, they say it was symbolic. They link it to Hazor's wickedness, which is mentioned in other parts of the Bible.
So it could be both. Strategic and a kind of divine judgment.
You got it. That's what's so fascinating about these stories. There's always more to them. They make us think about history, strategy, faith, even justice.
It's true, there's always more to uncover. And speaking of uncovering, we can't forget that list of defeated kings in chapter 12. It's like a victory lap, but on paper.
It's quite the list, 31 kings, if you can believe it. Each name, well, it represents a conquered territory. Really shows you the scale of what Joshua accomplished. Imagine reading that list back then.
Talk about a power move. And it's more than just bragging, right?
Yeah.
It's a statement. This is ours now. This land belongs to the Israelites. It's like the promise is fulfilled. God promised them this land, and now they're there.
It shows that connection, right, between their faith, their history, even their identity as a people. But even with such a huge victory, there are these little things, these loose ends that make you wonder.
Like what happened to Jack?
Exactly. Like the Anakim, for example. Remember them?
Oh, yeah. The giants. They were like stuff of legends. Everyone was afraid of them.
The text says they were wiped out in some areas, but it never actually says what happened to all of them.
So some of them could have survived. Driven into hiding, maybe?
It's possible, right? It's a question that sparked a lot of stories and legends over the years.
It's those unanswered questions that make these ancient texts so interesting, I think.
Yeah.
You can't help but wonder, to try to fill in the gaps yourself.
It reminds us that even with these ancient stories, there's always room for interpretation, for asking questions, for looking at things in new ways. Keeps the conversation going.
Absolutely. And that's what makes studying history so interesting. It's not just dates and names. It's about trying to understand the people who lived back then, their motivations, their beliefs, what they were afraid of.
A journey of discovery. And I think that's a good place to leave it for today. As we wrap up our deep dive into Joshua, chapters 10 through 12, I hope you've come away with not just a clearer understanding of what happened, but also a sense of wonder. These ancient stories, they still have so much to teach us.
I couldn't agree more. We've talked about epic battles, divine intervention, and maybe even stumbled upon some historical mysteries along the way. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it's that a good story, well, it has power. It can capture your imagination, make you question what you think you know, and help you see the world, maybe even your own life, in a new light. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
Welcome to Charlie and Mia's podcast. We're embarking on an exciting journey to read through the entire Bible in just 1 year. Every day, we dive into Scripture, exploring its meanings and how it applies to our lives today. We invite you to join us on this incredible adventure of learning and discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.